Hey there, welcome to episode 174 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We're recording this at 10:32 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time here in the Greater Vegas area on Tuesday, June 16, 2026. We normally publish new episodes of this audio program on Tuesdays, usually in the morning or pretty close to it, so we'll be in there somewhere. By the way, the title, almost forgot. The title and topic of today's episode is Cross-Cohort Collaboration. If you haven't heard previous episodes where I've touched on this topic, it seemed appropriate that we can kind of bring it current. If you're not familiar with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, or perhaps you've never heard the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program, a very brief introduction. We are a Nevada nonprofit corporation. We're also a 501c3 public charity. We were founded in June of 2022, a reboot of sorts of the original Code for Vegas Brigade. Technically, I think it was before the Brigade program started, but somewhere in there, of Code for America, more than a decade ago. Then kind of shut down for a while. We rebooted Code for Vegas as an independent standalone organization, Code for Vegas Foundation. Then we renamed to be more inclusive of people who are not necessarily coders. Code for Vegas sort of loads that up right up front there. What if I'm not a coder? So innovation is it's a term that is much more broad, a little bit more vague. Is there coding? Sure. Can I do something other than coding? Absolutely. So Innovate for Vegas, broad, loaded with possibility. So our foundation is coming up on the end of its fourth fiscal year at the end of June. We are in June, as I mentioned. So we'll see what the fifth year brings. There are a few things I've talked about in previous episodes, but there are a few things in the way of civic innovation and reaching out to all of Vegas, if I can speak, to enable and encourage everyone to jump in on this whole innovation thing at their own speed, tackling possibilities that they find maybe in their own backyard, so to speak, in their neighborhoods, in their communities, on their commute to school or work or wherever, looking around saying, somebody should fix that. Well, maybe you could fix it. Maybe you can make things better. Our purpose statement happens to be to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. But as we'll talk about later in this episode, our foundation and the cohort that makes up our foundation, is focused on longer, like we have a strategy, we have longer term initiatives. They all kind of fit together. So we're kind of mapping that out for ongoing development and possibility, but individuals who just want to try out some ideas and maybe this thing that I have been thinking about for a while would make this, whatever it is, easier, better, and so on. So we're aiming to facilitate that in September of this year with a City Camp event. City Camp is, of course, a national sort of open source brand. It's an event, or it's a type of event and a brand and sort of a collection of practices and terms and, how to and what to not do. It was co-founded by the original founder of Code for America, and it's essentially it's a platform to reach out to communities to say, hey, why don't we all get together and think about some ways that we could fix or address or improve some particular topics. And it's a relatively short time frame. It's like a weekend. I've been referring to it as a hackathon-like. I don't think it's intended to be quite a hackathon. It's really more of a conversation, a discussion, a forum. It's an unconference format. I think anything is possible, though. So we'll see. We'll see how things unfold. We've had ongoing open pre-planning sessions, so we can plan for the planning. An unconference is left to its participants to decide some of the finer points during the actual unconference. But, pre-planning, like a venue. Should we think about eating, maybe drinking, maybe having some dry erase markers and dry erase boards? So it's basically setting everyone up for success, so pre-planning. And then as well, the Smarter Smart City Challenge, which I'm sure we'll talk about more coming up, aiming for June 2nd, 5th, something like that. January of 2027 somewhere in that first week after New Year's. New Year's is a bad time to start a lot of things. So shortly after New Year's, here in Vegas, we'll kick off the Smarter Smart City Challenge, open to anyone, any age, any interest, whatever you have on your mind, whatever ideas, notions. You have all year, rather than just one weekend, something that could be missed for scheduling conflict. Maybe you don't have time to put in, a whole day or two on something, but you could spread that out over a full year. So 1 full year to maximize potential participation and to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation for everyone in our global innovation hub that is Greater Vegas. That was a lot before we even get to the show notes. Anyway, today's title and topic, cross-cohort collaboration, as I mentioned. I've already gone through the purpose statement. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes. By the way, this audio program, we talk about all the things that I just kind of touched on, and a lot more things, projects, initiatives, direction, goals, motivation, the Civic Volunteer Winter. So hopefully you were able to locate the episode description, which contains those show notes, which include a summary, which I'll read to you. And I was going to include some links, but there's going to be a lot of links between now and City Camp in September. So today we're just going to talk more specifically about cross-cohort collaboration from a sort of a high-level view of, the why and the what, and go from there. So here we go, the summary of today's episode. With Greater Vegas suffering somewhat from a silo structure, intended or otherwise, we have had much to ponder concerning the way former brigades and newly formed and forming cohorts of civic volunteers pursuing innovation, I like that, civic innovation could, maybe should, collaborate. And I don't know if it was clear when I started that sentence. We're taking some insights, some inspiration on the way the Greater Vegas area works as far as isolation, or what I prefer to say is insulation. It's not really isolation. Isolation has a sort of a proactive feel to it. But insular, siloed efforts, usually people work amongst themselves. They don't really tend to reach out too much for whatever reason. There's a long culture of that. A lot of momentum in that direction, I think. Well, so based on, observation, some empirical observation here locally, what can we apply? What have we learned that we can apply to the way former brigades and newcomers to the world, the exciting world of civic innovation and civic volunteerism? How can we put all this together and make it go faster, better? We'll see. The links, as usual, are 2 homepage links. And like I said, there will be opportunities in the future to cover some more specific aspects of some of what I'm going to mention here today. It'll be more interesting if we can escape the Civic Volunteer Winter. We'll find out. Our 2 homepages are both spelled exactly the same. Innovate for Vegas. Innovate FOR Vegas. INNOVATE FOR VEGAS. Why 2 homepages? Well, one is for our activities, our initiatives, the repositories, the documentation, some ideas. Eventually we'll move in some sort of dry erase online whiteboard, I guess you could say, and some other tools. Not everything is going to be code. So some of it will just be conversation and discussion and ideation, right? But we'll capture that. And the reason that we are using, in this case, GitHub, first of all, we have a free team subscription. Thanks, Microsoft. GitHub for nonprofits. And so it's a useful, not an ideal, not perfect, but a useful tool that totally fits within our budget. That's nice. And it also, it's a good thing to know how to use, whether you're going to be a coder or otherwise. GitHub is useful for more than just code. In our case, one area that I'm particularly focused on is attribution. So if we can keep everybody who's contributing to a particular project within an initiative, sort of keep track, not to spy on anyone, but so at the end of the day, we don't forget that, oh, that's right, these 2 people, they were able to make some solid contributions, although not high profile, not very loud, but still important, right? As anyone who contributes their civic volunteer time, effort, and expertise would be. So we'll use those tools to make sure that we don't forget anyone. Right now, that would be difficult to do. There's very little in the way of participation, but in a perfect world, there would be so much going on that we don't want to let anybody slip through the memory cracks. And then, I'm not merely saying this. I would feel bad if somebody contributed their effort and so on, and then their name didn't show up with everybody else, right? So it's a useful tool for things like that. Even if you're not a coder, still the ability to participate on you can use air quotes if you want, on a team. GitHub has teams. So you're on there, people can see, oh, here's the 10 people working on this thing, whatever the thing is. So it's useful for that at the very basic level. And then if you're writing code, or you're writing documentation, or you're just making a discussion comment, maybe you're adding it, maybe you found a bug. So there's all kinds of ways that are not coding where GitHub or similar tools come in handy. Will we move to similar tools? That's for another episode in the future. But GitHub works when it's working. Our alternate website, so the activity site is more for the day-to-day, here's what we're working on. And when I say we, I wish it was a lot more people. But so when there's only one person, as is the case now, not a lot of recorded effort on the GitHub because there's a lot of stuff going on that's not happening on the GitHub. So outreach, engagement, talking to other people, locating, identifying and interacting with potential board members for our next fiscal year. These are not necessarily GitHub items, but our foundation website, innovateforvegas.foundation, I recall I described we are a nonprofit corporation here in Nevada. We have bylaws, board of directors, as I mentioned, all sorts of official business elements that we can make sure we make available to the general public. And so if you're not so much into the hands-on stuff, or if you're into the hands-on stuff, but you're not really so curious about bylaws and so on, this split enables us to have sort of a business site and then a more fun, if you like, more public-facing versus sort of business-oriented website. So yeah, two websites, not in one. Two sides of the same poker chip, as I say with eyes rolled. So that's the story. Time for the episode to begin. At the beginning, I personally was not affiliated with Code for America in the before times, so I can only look at the way things were as we rebooted in 2022. So I was not part of Code for Vegas a decade ago, etc. While Code for America is working through their revisioning, that's capital R-E, capital V, revisioning process regarding how brigades would go through an onboarding process and then engage with the organization on the whole. So they initially said, well, you can't rejoin Code for America yet because we're going through this revisioning process. That was sort of fortuitous, I think. Based on what I saw at the time, it did not appear that Code for America was equipped to actually connect the various brigades in a useful way. They were using Slack, for example, so that's not bad. It's not an open discussion. I'm gonna get some water here. Hang on a second. All right, where was I? Slack is not an open conversation usually for the internet, for people to come upon and say, oh yes, I have some ideas on that, or I would like to participate in this. So, whatever their overall approach was. But connecting the various brigades in a useful way to promote collaboration, maybe useful, maybe structured would be a better way of looking at it. And they certainly, so not like humans coming across each other, coming upon a conversation, but more, specific search, structured data searches and so on. And they certainly were not made to be easily discovered in general, the brigades and all of this undertaking? Yeah, certainly not by people in a particular locale. So in other words, if somebody in Las Vegas was saying, I wonder if there is something called Code for Vegas, like you don't arrive at that search without knowing ahead of time that you're searching for that. So how do you discover that, there are people that are contributing their civic volunteer time and effort and expertise to making this my where I live, they're making it better. So how do you make that connection? And you can, of course, leave it to Code for Vegas and the respective cohorts in different places, which is totally fine, but Code for America could also have sort of affixed their label to additional, oh, hey, you found Code for Vegas. Where are you located? Oh, in fact, did you know there's a Code for Vegas brigade right down the street from you? That kind of thing. It's not clear to me that was happening. Certainly it wasn't when I was poking around at the time. So maybe before that, who knows? They would not people did not find much in the way of Code for America effort to point to our website, which at the time was not our website, but today, oh yes, here's the Innovate for Vegas website, since you happen to be in Vegas, that kind of thing. Didn't really see that in place. Maybe point to the GitHub repository, the organization, not the repository, the organization on GitHub, which is also Innovate for Vegas, and so on and so on. So there are ways that it could have been more of a sort of proactive relationship, I think. These existed, and they do for us today, of course, the website, the GitHub organization, and so on. But, well, my sense was that this was more of a one-way street of sorts. Announce the brigade membership in relationship with Code for America on the brigade's website and elsewhere, and you still see some of that lingering today, especially if particular brigades kind of shut down and their website is still lingering or their GitHub organization is still available. So you can peruse their old projects and so on. That's totally fine. But they may have said, we're a Code for America brigade. Not true anymore. So yeah, there was the announcement from the brigades about the affiliation with Code for America, but not always in the other direction. They're a little bit quiet. They were a little bit quiet for the most part. So, and I could be wrong. Maybe I missed the entire, glitter and rainbows. Hey, don't forget there are people in your neighborhood that are trying to make where you are better. And if you want to join in, here we are, and that kind of thing. I don't know if that was true. I didn't have that sense. So I could be wrong. I kind of hope I am wrong, but yeah. When I had asked in a call with the Code for America folks how to go about finding what other brigades were working on, and my motivation at the time was a combination of, is anyone working on something that would be similar to some of the things I had in mind, but also, hey, what are people up to? I was pointing to what was basically a slide deck online, not really searchable in any useful way. I mean, I guess you could load up, I think you would go by name of organization, not necessarily region. So, Code for, Hack for, Open Vegas, Hack for Vegas, Code for Vegas. So you kind of had to know, like, maybe Las Vegas, New Mexico had a Code for Vegas. So it would have been more interesting, in my opinion, if it was regional or maybe searchable by project type, or there are a whole bunch of possibilities, or, they didn't really do that. So it was kind of more like a slide deck, not really searchable, and possibly not maintained. It wasn't really clear to me at the time, this was in 2022, that everything I was seeing was still, happening. We never officially rejoined Code for America because of the revisioning process and because of, let's call it a lack of meeting of the minds. And their revisioning plans eventually turned into the end of the brigade program. So fortuitous again. So we can only speculate as to whether they could have embraced modernity a little bit more at all and made the brigade network more discoverable for everyone, other brigades, the general population of the world, etc. There was a brigade section of the Code for America website, so it wasn't a hidden secret, but it wasn't. I think volunteers should be kind of featured. Hey, by the way, here are people that are not paid at all, except for maybe some personal satisfaction of knowing that they're making their communities better. Right? Maybe we should highlight that. So we can disagree, I guess. The post-brigade time, so this was, I think the brigades were sunset at the end of 2023, I think, completely, or sometime in 2024. But eventually, no more brigades, no more support, no more fiscal sponsorship, all that. So in a post-brigade and civic volunteer winter timeframe, which I think we're still in, I've referred to the civic volunteer winter countless times in previous episodes and elsewhere. So speaking, writing. Basically, this is a tendency for former participants in any particular cohort of the brigades, former brigades, to disappear, take an extended break perhaps. These are people who have been involved for some amount of time. Maybe they're in need of a break or some re-engagement. Maybe take a step back and then say, oh, you know what, I have some time to refresh, to reflect on some new ideas and so on. This is part of the problem, but not the main part of the problem. People can only give so much on a volunteer basis. This is understandable, but has the attraction to the idea of civic volunteerism faded? For some it has, and that's the way it is. The pay is horrible, but the benefits are also questionable, unless you reach a certain point where you start to realize, oh, we're actually making positive changes, and the thing that I worked on is now a thing that other people can use, etc. Something that takes time. What was it? If everybody were doing it, but really the high quality fractional quote is, we do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. As the so-called sunset process was coming to a close with the brigade program, and it was truly ended, the former brigades were left to their own devices, basically. For the most part, they were let down gently, but not too gently, if that makes sense. I think they actually moved out the actual sunset date, so people had more time to make use of the tools that were available for free, sponsored by Code for America, basically. So, Zoom, Slack, etc. And from my conversations with a small number of the people who were in the brigades that were, I'll use the words, hit hardest by the sunset process or the sunset concept. There was an actual sense of betrayal, certainly that this was something of a rug pull, to use a current expression. And it was fairly obvious that some were throwing up their hands and moving on. I've had enough of this, that kind of thing. The people who have given up are not a part of the problem at all, actually. Though obviously the circumstances which led to that turn of events are part of the problem. So there is a lingering possibility of resentment or bad taste in the mouth, right? I don't want that to happen again. I spent all this time and I feel, the rug pull notion is probably appropriate. The large part of the civic volunteer winter problem, if I can insert a word that I forgot, large part of the civic volunteer winter problem, I think it's a problem, and this is my view, is the lack of newcomers to the notion of civic volunteerism. We are getting this message in some quarters in this new age of AI that people are no longer, they no longer need to pursue computer science degrees. How about that? As an example, we will begin to see more of this if the AI bubble doesn't burst. It's whatever. So we're not here to discuss that, but we'll see what things happen in the near term. So don't even bother learning how to code. Don't even bother learning how some technologies work. The AI will do it for you, etc. So that people no longer need to pursue these degrees. And because AI is taking the entry-level jobs, then you got to find something else to do. So there's already some turmoil. This is, ChatGPT was released in November 30th of 2022. So the beginning of the uncertain times, perhaps, that may be a factor. Not really sure. We can cover the issues with this thinking in a future episode about whether AI is going to do your civic volunteering for you. I'll give you a hint right now, it isn't. And our org is not code only. But in this example, the newcomer population shrinks, the experienced population departs or takes a break, and we have a civic volunteer winter. So, hibernation. Things are slowed down because it is so cold. We're shivering a little bit. This is not unique to Vegas. It is not a universal truth. I'm not claiming that this applies to everyone everywhere, but it is definitely true in Vegas. No doubt. So what about the landscape? The terrain on which we find ourselves. The brigade program was a network of local volunteer cohorts, typically fiscally sponsored by Code for America, and participating in locally focused projects sometimes. They were tech-centric, though not necessarily limited to tech, and this is a messaging challenge that we jumped over and around in our early days with our rename. And then occasionally volunteers would work on projects that were driven, directed, managed by Code for Vegas. I'm sorry, Freudian slip, Code for America. So Code for America might engage a municipality, a county, a state, city, and might say, okay, we want to work with something that there's a brigade that could contribute to this. Brigade members could join in on a project. During the sort of the sunset period, there was some sort of a tax benefit, something application that was developed for Puerto Rico, and it was a combination of volunteers from some brigade or brigades and actual paid Code for America employees. One of the issues that I had was I contacted Code for America and I asked in their press release where they announced, they congratulated the program managers and some other Code for America folks. I said, hey, do you have a list of the volunteers that also worked on this? And the answer was, it was hard to keep track. We could probably find that information and we could email it to you. And so now maybe my comments earlier about GitHub and keeping track of who is a part of a particular undertaking doesn't get no oopsing. So I can laugh about it now, but I was actually sort of shocked. Like, how can you ask people to be volunteers and then only the people being paid get any sort of accolades? So I thought that was, in my book, a substantial failure. So just a fundamental, you don't, unless they want to be left out, right? Like, I would rather not have my name on this. I kind of want to keep myself private and so on. Only use my first name. It's whatever it is. But I think the general approach should be, hey, if you spend your time, effort, and expertise to try to make something better in the world, then sort of it's just slightly above zero is like a mention. Like, hey, this was brought to you by, Alvin, Simon, and Theodore. Thank you, chipmunks. But anyway, so that was a thing that kind of left a bad taste, perhaps. In my view, this setup, the cohorts around the U.S. as clients of sorts to the top-level Code for America project management structure, to have that arrangement where employees of Code for America could find themselves directing volunteers, which is generally problematic anyway, whether or not they are getting credit for their work, which they should, but also, depends on the circumstance, maybe. If you're volunteering for something that's, I guess it's more of a question of expectations, and yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that, but the lack of attribution, definitely a problem. It's problematic, but I don't have enough detail on how this was actually working at the time. And it's now history. It's, water under the bridge, as they say. Still, the top-down central planning aspects of civic volunteerism were established, at least somewhat, with the Code for America effort. There have been other efforts, I'm sure, very similar, some other efforts very different. So, but so far in the universe of brigades, former brigades, and the various, what has become of all of this, I think old habits may be difficult to break. I've been a part of discussions over the years between people with experience in the brigade program or similar, including one of our board members. He was a co-founder and co-captain of Code for Vegas. So he was a board member for our Code for Vegas and then Innovate for Vegas in the first year. I think the second year too. I've written this down somewhere else, but the conversation has reached a lament of sorts amongst these people that participation is down. People tend to simply disappear without saying anything, and this is in various contexts, in various locations, brigades in different parts of the country. This is not universally true, as I've mentioned. So some people have an active community of cohort members that are working on stuff when they can and as they're able and so on. So a variety of circumstance. At this point, I would usually ask why, right? Say I was on a call with about 5 people one time on a Zoom, and 4 people are saying, oh yeah, nobody comes anymore. It's really hard to get people to show up. It's hard to make progress and so on. So I'm the 5th person. I said, if a group of people who are motivated to work in this space are having this conversation as we are, why they, which in that case, we could not collaborate at a distance and perhaps accomplish some of the common parts that we want to accomplish, whatever they are, so that some progress toward particular and respective goals could be made even in the cold, the civic volunteer winter, as I've referred to previously. So in other words, we have people on a call right now who are all saying the same thing. Oh, it'd be nice if people would show up. And yet we have shown up. Shown up. We're here. Can we not help each other? This doesn't get much traction, strangely enough, even though it is a core principle behind open source development, right? Why should I reinvent a wheel in whatever form when someone else has already done it in 10 different languages and so on, right? So the ability, no, not one person, 10, you know what I mean? The ability to leverage the work of others freely and then to offer the same in return. That's sort of a fundamental tenet of how the open source movement, if you want to refer to it that way, how that has become such an effective way of enabling so much is because people who need to accomplish a great many things to conduct an experiment or achieve some result or some goal, they're able to quite literally stand on the shoulders of giants because others have solved some of the problems. So that reduces the number of elements of their overall challenge that they need to solve. So, and it can work in multiple directions. So there's nothing new here, but not a lot of traction. As I said, it's more of a, yeah, what? So the larger environment, the civic volunteer universe, if you will need to sort itself out in a post-brigade world, perhaps. And let us not forget that some people out there may and hopefully are interested in local community elevation through civic volunteer, civic innovation. Yes, that's a mouthful. So as a civic volunteer participating in civic innovation, a civic volunteer can participate in innovation. That would suggest that you are city-focused volunteers, but your innovation may not be city or locality focused. You may be working on some general innovation, whatever that means. Let's not harp on that. And they have no legacy with brigades and Code for America. These are people that are new. They should not be turned away. They should be enabled and encouraged and all that. There's got to be a reason that those are on our purpose statement. Let me get some more water here. I got to enjoy the water in Vegas while we still have some. They have no legacy. That's the important part. In these scenarios, it is possible they will take a hint from Hacktoberfest, for example, and attempt to discover other cohorts by project or maybe via social media, so they can search for is somebody else working on something similar, or is anybody else on Blue Sky or Twitter or X or somewhere on a Mastodon server, maybe some other means. This is certainly a possibility, but in my view, this leaves a lot of opportunity on the table. And I've selected Hacktoberfest here because I'm going to refer to them again. Them as if Hacktoberfest is not them. There are people who drive it, but it's more of an approach to attracting more people to open source contribution, but we'll get there in a second. So now we get to the ACT Act versus Project ACT or Project Act. I don't mention the Alliance of Civic Technologists. That's the first one, ACT Act. I don't mention them so much, mostly because I don't think their approach is actually workable. I'm not trying to be mean here. I'm just keeping it real. I may have received an early version of their vision when they were forming. Some of the conversation I had with longtime brigade members and their frustrated departures was in the Alliance Discord, in fact. So I referred to that earlier about people who had been around for a while were frustrated and throwing their hands up. That was where some of those conversations took place. With some notion of picking up where Code for America left off, but with less project management, more advocacy, more of a tent to be under or in, I guess. In a big tent, under a big tent, whatever it is. That wasn't completely sorted as they were kicking off the effort in earnest, but that appears to be where they have landed so far, I think, anyway. So yeah, I wasn't really sure. I kind of got the sense they were trying to put the band back together, and in my mind, Code for America was making some mistakes. So I was concerned that the same mistakes would be kind of built in. I'm not convinced that is not a good assumption, but we're on the outside looking in, so I can't really go beyond that. So I don't know. When we were forming our independent organization, Code for Vegas and then Innovate for Vegas Foundation, rebooting, so to speak, away from Code for America and their brigade program, I heard through the grapevine that other brigades were expressing interest in some autonomy also, maybe even sovereignty. Right? We were not only autonomous, but we were sovereign. We were no longer affiliated with Code for America. In fact, that was one reason, although the lesser reason, that we did change our name. The main reason was the public-facing, interpretation of, code being in the name means, oh, this must be for coders. So Innovate for Vegas was more appropriate, and it fits with the city's branding. There's an innovation district. There's an innovation center. There's the fact that The Greater Vegas area considers itself to be a global innovation hub. The I word comes up a lot. So it just made more sense. And innovation can take many forms. You don't need to be a coder. It just fits better. So other brigades expressed, quietly, like, hey, you guys get to be away from this. Like, how can we do that? So we internally, our board of directors, we discussed starting a support effort to reach out and facilitate a forum, perhaps, maybe some resource sharing, like here's how we did it, here's some starting points, perhaps. Not legal advice, but just some ideas to start with around breaking away from Code for America, becoming sovereign cohorts, or at least autonomous. And the reason autonomous is a little bit easier is because maybe you're a part of another organization through a fiscal sponsorship relationship, or whatever the case. So being autonomous is a little bit easier. Being completely sovereign takes a little bit more effort, costs a little bit more money. So autonomy is a good baseline. So you get to decide what you want to do and how you want to do it. And then if someone has oversight over you, if you're not completely sovereign, hopefully that's minimal. We called it Project ACT for Autonomous Cohort Transformation. We want to go from being fiscally sponsored part of Code for America to our own thing. This was an unintended acronym collision with the Alliance of Civic Technologists. They also call themselves ACT. Thus far, it has not been an issue, but maybe it's noteworthy. And ACT was the term ACT, which generally speaking is it's a verb, action, act, do something. This was in mind at scale, so many people arrived at this. So that's probably good, I guess. Where the Alliance had a sort of velvet rope of sorts, inviting former brigades to join first. Like, you have to have been a former brigade to become a part of the Alliance of Civic Technologists. You had to pass some other tests, like you had to have a website and a code of conduct, and fairly minimal, but you had to be a former brigade. So that left out any newcomers for the time being. I think they have since opened up to the larger audience, so that's fine. And they do indeed have requirements to join, as I suggested. So Project ACT was entirely, and still is, entirely decentralized, and still is. I read my own mind there. As far as what its goals were and so on, here is where I will point to the fork in that road, where we retain the autonomous cohort transformation idea. So that's still a possibility, but not really applicable anymore in a post-brigade world. It's not really so useful anymore, other than sharing ideas. If you're going to form a nonprofit, if you're going to apply to be a 501c3 to get the IRS determination of same, so on. So the final T in the sort of the fork, the focused effort became tessellation, which is another word for mosaic, as in an arrangement of tiles in a visually appealing form. So the autonomous cohort tessellation kind of emerged with a new set of goals. What are those goals? Well, you've come to the right place. The tessellation kind of has a ring to it, I think. This is a very brief recap of what we have covered previously. I've talked about Project ACT. I think I had a whole entire episode about it, at least one. It's still a work in progress, suffering from the same civic volunteer winter impact as all of our other efforts are. But if you can imagine, or as I've typed here, imagine a wall of tiles, one for each cohort, located approximately where they would be relative to each other or others geographically. You have the initial idea. Oh, look, it's a mosaic of civic volunteers in action. The implementation of this mosaic, the tessellation, is actually data-centric. So that discovery is actually built in first. Generating a list of cohorts is as easy as making a mosaic map. Boy, if I could speak, it'd be a big win. So this is by design, and this addresses the process early on, collecting disparate brigade information to determine which were still around for ACT to reach out. That's the Alliance half. So they had a manual process to gather up. It was sort of we need contact information, which we don't have. So it was a little bit arduous, and there was some outdated info and whatnot. So this manual process at scale is not ideal. That hands the work to one person in this case, and oh, if you need to change anything, you got to contact this person. Let's be honest, the technology to enable that as a web form or something exists, so not ideal. I mean, given the nature of the cohort crowd, it literally could have been a GitHub project, or sorry, repository. Like the Alliance of Civic Technologists has a GitHub organization. There could be a repository dedicated to collecting contact information for former brigades. You join the organization as the main contact. I'm a part of the Alliance of Civic Technologists on GitHub. So you're visible as a former brigade contact, and then you can update or maintain some entries in a repository that would be, here's our current website and so on. And so everybody is reachable. Hey, I'm going to hand this off to somebody else and so on. So this is a problem that would be solved, but it was addressed with a spreadsheet. Not the best way, but somebody was doing it. I guess that's something. Now, suppose that mosaic is not illustrating cohorts, but is now illustrating what the cohorts are working on. Not a simple description, which that's easy, but enough detail so that someone seeking out cohorts for potential collaboration on, say, public transit tools, maybe they're developing open transit project as we started off with, could find projects in that area, maybe similar or somewhat related, without wading through countless Google or GitHub search results, or whatever AI you try to use and whatever it provides. If you have ever conducted a faceted search where you are looking for items in a price range or a particular size or color and brand, so those are called faceted search. So you drill down, right? Apply a price range and then a particular size or color and then a brand, or maybe you change the ordering of those. You have some idea what this would be, and this takes advantage of technologies, tools, and methods that have been around for decades, and also some modernity in there as well. An actual tile could be a graphic element. It's part of the idea because the general public may be curious to know about people spending time locally, as I mentioned. Like, hey, is anybody working on some volunteer efforts to make our Vegas communities better? Oh, look. And maybe beyond elevating their communities with practice, volunteer time, effort, and expertise that you could make more visible so people can understand and sort of appreciate, like, oh, people are really spending time on this. Nice. Okay, that's optimistic. Start with local educators and students looking for on-ramps of sorts, like, hey, I want to learn how to do some of these things, and there are other people doing these things. Maybe I could join in. Probably yes. I had to get some more water, sorry. Maybe the local press is reporting on local activities. Of course, the cohorts in search of peers, proximal and distal. Is anyone else working on fill in blank? A graphical representation is one way to show that information. Tabular data is another, and probably more useful in some cases. Programmatic access, also convenient. Maybe there are others. So having a data-centric view rather than like a spreadsheet human-centric view is the sort of a core fundamental feature. A decentralized database of cohorts is that core, without a central authority deciding whether your cohort can participate or not. So decentralization, federation, these are all becoming the new thing. It's the new thing that was actually also the old thing. Discovery is now a matter of searching an opt-in space. Self-identified as civic volunteer, civic innovation cohorts, perhaps. This is not the only way to make use of this idea, and we'll end this episode with some of those. Now, the 3 C's. This is the second to last section. The 3 C's. I am a fan of alliteration, especially consonants in this case, but also assonants. Alliteration, as some may have noticed, so the take-home message for Project ACT, the value proposition, if you like, which makes participation worthwhile, starts with connection. So I said the 3 C's, I'll give you a little hint. Connection, communication, collaboration. So discovery is more of a search results outcome, or kind of a starting point on the way to connection. But as is true of so many scenarios in general, knowing others are out there and alerting them to your own presence, like, hey, we're working on stuff too. Maybe it's up there with that first contact scene in the Martian movie. Did I say the Martian? Oh, yeah. Because I was gonna say, wait, Hail Mary? No. when Watney finds the Pathfinder, and he's able to get the camera to send the image, and then he receives, can you see me, or are you receiving me, or whatever, and then they respond with yes by rotating the camera to the sign. That okay, we both know about each other, right? Connection. The same could be true in the Hail Mary movie, but I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. I read the book. Definitely include the book if you're going to be interested in the movie. Communication next. And this seems obvious, but that spreadsheet I referred to did not always have current contact information for each of the former brigades, or even a complete list of brigades, perhaps. So it was not the best way. Not that this would magically solve the problem, but to know that there is a structure and not trying to figure out which person is in charge, but that there is a way, in a decentralized way, to add yourself, and that it would be picked up and included and so on. This is a sort of it's a decentralized approach, right? So multiple places where your information would be updated as a matter of course. An authoritative contact email address, maybe more, but email is usually a great start. So maybe you have a Twitter handle for your organization or whatever it is. Perhaps an easy way to join a meetup or conversation forum, but email is a key, maybe the key to as a starting point to enable or perhaps bootstrap this communication process. So once you've connected and you're now able to communicate, the fun may begin. Collaboration, collaboration is the third C. It may not be the logical next step after first contact and established communication. There may be some other things in there, but the ability to maintain the first two C's may lead to collaboration at some point. So it's not like you must begin collaborating immediately, but once you have connection and communication, the rest may follow. So at some point you may be, are you guys working on? Oh, we're working on that too. Kind of thing. And this could be in either or both directions. Either or both directions. Most important here, if we imagine beyond two cohorts connecting and communicating, I wrote communicating. So seriously, what am I doing? I don't know how keyboards work anymore. Okay, communicating. Maybe there'd be 12, 24, more. I want to say there were something like 55, maybe more, brigades at some point from Code for America days. And in this vision, there's no such formality. So it could be one person who wants to start something. It's a club of one person. It's not a nonprofit entity. It's not a formally structured anything. It's a desire to participate and someone actually participating. Those are good things. So they should not be kept out. So they're connected and they're communicating. Maybe they're in a pre-collaboration state. Could be. If we imagine behind just the two cohorts, too many, one new cohort enters the mix and there's 24, now you're on your way to 36, and they can all start discovering each other more easily because of the decentralized nature of the graph, the network graph. And these could be domestic, international, right? It would be possible to not even limit it to civic volunteer, civic innovation cohorts. It could be a variety of cohorts of one or more person doing interesting things. So now we have a way to locate others doing similar things without the need to join anything. Not formally join anything, obviously from a network protocol standpoint. You're joining this decentralization. If you're familiar with FOF, a friend of a friend, it's basically that, right? So once you have made a connection and somebody says, let's put you in our FOF table and we're in your FOF table, then as you are discovered by others, this information will flow to anyone who wants to maintain a decentralized database. So the information just flows automatically. That's what computers are for, after all. Autonomy is assumed and sovereignty is a choice, beginning with self-hosting a Project Act tile database, for example. So if you want to be completely sovereign, then you can keep track of your connections and your communications and your collaborations, or you can consult another Project Act tile database. Tile database, by the way. I'm going to refer to FOF again and DOPE. I pronounce it DOPE. It might be DOAP. Friend of a friend, FOAF, FOF, and description of a project, DOPE. So those will come together. These structured data, ontologies, I guess, ontology language for the web, OWL, and RDFs, resource description framework. All this stuff is decades old, and it works. And actually, it's more AI friendly than Markdown. So whatever is old is now new again. So tile, as in mosaic, tile is a tessellation information linking entities file. So it can link cohorts, it can link individuals, taking advantage of FOF, initiatives and projects, taking advantage of DOPE. So because of the nature of how the old semantic web ideas work, you can make use of existing vocabularies and extend them with new parts of vocabulary. So the tile vocabulary is really just FOF and DOPE and some other things, and then some specific elements to make the tile network easier to connect and traverse and so on. Very much like magic. There are other use cases, as I hinted at, and this is where we'll end the episode with these final points. This episode is not at all a deep dive into this whole idea, by the way. That is what collaborative online meetups are for, to actually discuss, in addition to blue sky descriptive documents and user stories and whatnot. And we will cover Agile for Volunteers soon. Do not for a moment believe we will not. But the idea to pursue this notion did arise from the inability to locate peer cohorts before and after the Code for America infrastructure. So before and after the sunset, really. But also leads to some other application spaces, especially when we think back to the motivation for FOF and DOPE, which will figure in to Project Active Course. So again, they would be part of the what they would extend. Well, no, tile would extend them. There you go. Those vocabularies would be a part of the tile vocabulary. So some good work, and we'll stand on the shoulders of those giants. If you've heard of Hacktoberfest, which I referred to earlier, this is a challenge going on for over a decade now during the month of October to encourage contribution to open source projects, mostly for newcomers, but also in general, to bring attention to open source and the value of participating. Okay, those are not bad things. In recent years, there are two problems I say one might face, but so if you're on both sides of it, then it's one, but it's the two sides, really. There's the contributor side. It's about discovery. Where can I find something that I can contribute to? On the project maintainer side, how many contributions from inexperienced newcomers and now AI slop can be tolerated during that month without causing real issues for the people trying to actually get work done? Maybe they have day jobs. Maybe they didn't want to make this an 80-hour-a-week endeavor, because you do have to respond and approve pull requests, contributions from people participating in Hacktoberfest, so they get the credit for the work during the month. So you can't put it off, or you can't spend a month trying to catch up. And so it becomes somewhat arduous. Rather than being stuck in the GitHub and GitLab spaces also, by the way. Wait, did I skip a line here? While also participating in the program. Yeah. Rather than being stuck in the GitHub and GitLab spaces, so you Hacktoberfest at present is it only supports or is supported by GitHub and GitLab, so you can't really have the work that you'd like people to contribute to in other places. This is not a huge issue, but maybe it's an issue for some. Suppose each project had a tile in the mosaic, so to speak, for discovery and participation. Hacktoberfest has other problems that I've commented on previously, but this would be an interesting test of Project Act in another domain. So it'd be for a fixed time. One of the issues that I will point out is if you visit GitHub. I tried doing this on GitLab. It didn't have. It was last year. GitHub provides a little bit more of a count, but there are so many projects and repositories tagged with the Hacktoberfest label, so they show up in a Hacktoberfest search. But people don't tend to remove those, so some of those tags are old, and you just get a search results set that's huge. And if you sort them by like most recent contribution, then that's gonna cause more people to contribute to the first search results. So it's sort of a self-defeating prophecy. But it would be interesting to test this decentralized notion. Closer to home, though, this is the final point. Our peer former brigade cohort in Nevada, it was called Hack for Reno, recently archived their GitHub repos and allowed their domain name to expire. They have a hack for hack digit for reno.org. that one still exists because I think they use hack, and then hack for FOR, hack FOR reno.org has expired. The expired domain is the one that was associated with their GitHub hosted website, but they also would use hack number 4 Reno. So I think they probably own both, and maybe the other one will expire soon. I forget when it expired. I bet I could actually tell you. Hack4reno.org will expire August 24th of this year. So we'll see what happens on August 25th if they're still around. But anyway, so they've archived their efforts. So by all visible evidence, they appear to be shut down and done. To be honest, they never responded in any way to our outreach when we were rebooting back in 2022. So who knows? It's not clear how engaged they were over the last 4 years. So don't know. This has led to our adding an Innovate for Nevada initiative, which will begin as a simple deployment of the Project Act tools to capture a decentralized database of organizations innovating for the state, anywhere within Nevada or for Nevada. It could be tech, it could be whatever. And again, it wouldn't have to be GitHub repositories or GitLab repositories. It could be anywhere. There's a standard way to include this information, a normal everyday website and so on. So the nice part about using older technologies is that they were based on older ideas and older implementations. So there was no GitHub way back when. So it could be a club, a nonprofit, an individual, whatever the case. So we can actually build a decentralized database of sorts. When I say database, it could be an actual database. There's a ordered triple database from the Apache Foundation called Jenna. You could just use text files. You could do something else. So you could actually collect information in a completely structured way that is opt-in and decentralized. And then anyone else could collect this information also, so that you could have 2 databases, you could have 5 databases. So no one party is responsible for maintaining all of this. It's sort of self-maintaining as long as people want to be a part of the graph, the network graph. And so whatever it is, if you want to be a part of it, you edit a text file and you're basically good to go. It's almost that simple. You have to tell someone else you exist to kind of get, the chicken and the egg problem. Like, hey, here's our file that describes everything. Oh, okay, I'll add it to my table of stuff, and then it will propagate and go from there. Between a civic volunteer cohort and civic innovation initiative database for our peers, and something similar constrained to Nevada, and possibly the union of these, the beginnings of a federated network of cohorts will be found or discovered. And so this is once we get Project Act in a usable state, we can apply it to our usable state, whether it is or not, of Nevada, and start to reach out and connect. And so then the idea would be we would want to connect with at least one other cohort, entity, individual, whatever it is, exchange that information. And then if they reach out to someone, maybe they already know someone. Hey, this thing makes it easier to, okay, you have to do this, and we don't have to maintain that spreadsheet anymore. And then they'll tell 2 friends, and they'll tell 2 friends, and so on and so on. So the outreach could be very human, or we can automate through like a crawler, which is a logical component of this infrastructure. So all of this is very doable, and ideally would help with connection, communication, and collaboration with other cohorts doing similar things. Once we can discover them, the discovery problem is difficult. Once we get over that, the rest of it is fairly straightforward as long as people want to participate in this. The barrier to entry to participate is essentially none. So in a perfect world, this sort of what is that when you, I'm trying to picture it, like there's a certain weave, like a string or rope or something, so that when you kind of pull on the loose thread sort of thing, then it just sort of starts coming apart, right? So it kind of unfurls like that. And decentralized maintenance would be decentralized, completely federated, and we go from there. So that solves a substantial problem that would hopefully lead to a little bit more, well, it would lead to the connection and communication part. I cannot speak to collaboration. We can only cross our fingers and hope for the best, which is what I always do. And that is where I will leave you for today. Thank you for listening as always. Thank you for sharing this with others. Be sure and connect, communicate, and collaborate for your own self. And then we'll see if we can go from there. That would be nice. Thank you for listening. And I apologize for my voice being a little scratchy. The weather is insane. I was outside earlier this morning, and I'm sure that didn't help inhaling whatever it is. We have the particulates in the air. We are enjoying a warm early start to our summer here in Vegas. It's going to be hot anyway, but it's nice and warm now. And that's where we'll leave it. So thank you, as always, for everything. Take care. Be well. Bye.